You are listening to Something Rather Than Nothing. Creator and host, Ken Vellante. Editor and producer, Peter Bauer.
This is Ken Vellante with the Something Rather Than Nothing podcast, and I have Susan Tomorrow, who I've somehow wrangled and brought in, and basically are saying the things that in your head that I see you talk about in film and in connection to Clinton Street Theater. Welcome, Susan. Welcome to Something Rather Than Nothing.
Hey, Ken. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a great pleasure, and I wanted to start just to jump right into the theater and like the what to do and what's special about Clinton Street and just the unique program and what I see of like art outcroppings and art organizing and pulling people together to celebrate deeply loved art. So using that as the locale, tell us a little bit about what you do in the theater.
Yeah, totally. I got involved with the theater. Well, first off, I moved here from Austin about 2.5 years ago, and I was there for over a decade. I worked as a film programmer and at an independent video store. And I moved to Portland specifically because there's nowhere else on the planet that has independently operating century-old theaters, like let alone like 12 of them. And I love the Pacific Northwest. And I just ended up writing into the Clinton after going there, seeing a screening. No. It was a phone pole advertisement, Kinko's Punk Style, for The Last Angel of History and Lawnmower Man. And my thought was like, what the hell theater is showing that? Is like,
what?
Exactly. And so I immediately went and saw those with, just like a couple other people in the audience and just fell in love with the space. And it's been an independently operating functional theater since 1915. And it's just wonderful to like go through the layers of the history. For a decade, it was a XXX theater, and there's all these rumors and lores and histories that people have about the, wholesome and salacious parts of the theater.
Yeah.
I wrote in, and Aaron Coulter at the time was helping out the former owners, Lonnie Joe and Roger Lee, with programming and just kind of getting stuff together. And I just wrote in saying, hey, do you need any volunteers? I love the space. At the time, I was working full-time marketing. And yeah, he just hired me on the spot. So I started working nights there. And that's when kind of the transition of the sale happened. And yeah, my main job so far as a new owner is film programming and then like special events. Like we had the Freak Freely Fest last year in August, was brought together like 2 of my favorite zine heads in town and then a bunch of bands. So we're able to have music, drag, comedy in addition to film.
I'll tell you straight up why, I'm really digging on what you're talking about is that in doing the podcast, just thinking about organizing, like my day job's union organizer and just seeing how my brain tries to connect people and what they love and what they're passionate about, right? It's about like some sort of inspiration, right? If you're around 5 people who you can have a conversation about a film from 1969 that nobody's heard of, that's thrilling, and I get excited by that kind of potential in organizing, which is really why it's really so cool to chat. What about the Rocky Horror Picture Show and how long that's been playing and like the big like longest in the world? What's the exact story with that?
Yeah, it's been it's so cool to have that as part of the roster of the legend, that kind of collective, queer, obsessive community cult experience, having it being centered at the Clinton for 44 years now. Originally in the 70s, it was bought by a similar collective as the current owners, and they brought in Rocky in that kind of put lifeblood back in the theater after it being a triple X spot for a decade. It's incredible to see that even though it's been something that's running for so long, there's nothing that beats the enthusiasm of like a queer teenager from some smaller town, an hour away, that came in, that just gets to be themselves fully and creatively for the first time.
Yep.
Even my like grumpy old, Statler and Waldorf heart can't get mad at that. And the fact that it's still happening. There's the Clinton Street Cabaret, which is a whole separate organization that's been doing the live shadowcast for decades as well, in different incarnations. It's wonderful to have that as part of our helm.
Yeah. I think there's something particular about the places that you mentioned. I just want to mention something. You mentioned Austin and Portland. Now, I haven't been to Austin, but I know a lot of people who live in Austin. And part of it is a strange connection where I also lived in Madison, Wisconsin. And for some reason, there was some sort of nexus, like that was north and south between Madison and Austin, university towns in a unique state, just being diplomatic for once, but just like a very particular type of vibe. And of course, Portland being unto itself. But there's so much energy towards film and art in these type of places. And I heard when you were talking about it, how you just drawn to where is film? Where are these old theaters? Where is the biggest, video or movie rental store in the world, or the longest running? It's here. It's in Portland. Prior to me moving here, I was shocked because I was like, it was all my culture that I love, and I didn't know people dove in this hard. So there's something unique about where you're doing this as well in Portland. What's been your experience going from Austin to Portland for what you're doing?
Well, for what I'm doing, it's in Austin. There's you have the Austin Film Society, which is really cool. You have formerly, the Alamo Draft House, but that was more of an independent thing, and then it's been franchised since, and they're everywhere now. The Austin Film Festival and the Blue Starlight Drive-In. It used to have 2 independent video stores running for forever, I Love Video and Vulcan Video. And I worked at I Love Video for a long time and started doing outside programming for them. The cool thing about Austin is that every single bar is also a venue because everyone's a musician. But that also gives you more places to kind of independently screen things, here and there, kind of guerrilla style.
Yeah.
Which was great. But coming to Portland and just talking to people too that are from here, have lived here for a long time, and they're like, yeah, every neighborhood has its own 100-year-old operating theater. I'm like, what? Anything in Austin, since it is in Texas, unfortunately, whoever has the most money wins. Historical buildings don't get preserved. It's like Elon Musk and Joe Rogan docking over the city, Yes. And
that's a science fiction horror story, except that it's the news, but go ahead.
Oh yeah. For real. And there's still a lot of friends. I'm going actually next week to visit people that are holding it down, but things like old buildings, especially old art space buildings, don't stand a chance there. And here there's like a fierce preservation of them, which is incredible. Also, it's way too hot there. It's definitely too Texas.
This is not sponsored. I'm not sponsored by the Texas the travel agent. Nothing like that. So we're totally cool. I accept the indictment of, the folks I know there kind of couple there would end up going there connected to a dynamic that I often saw in Madison with Wisconsin. I've had a lot of experience both in rural and city environments over time, but there's such a distinct experience where if you're in Madison, you're in Austin, you are there, and there are particular things that are going to be unique there, which is the draw. And it creates these dynamics of like rural versus city that I think people kind of really antagonize. So, but Susan, we got some like conceptual questions. I gotta loft a couple of them at you because I am very interested in what your definition or what you believe art is. What is art?
For me, it can be anything from a physical object to an experience. And for film in particular, it's not just seeing the movie, how well it's done, how creatively it's shot, how good the cinematography is. It's going into a space that is for that collective consciousness and sitting into a piece of art with a bunch of other people experiencing it at the same time. And I'm sure that you've heard a song that changed your mood or seen a movie or read a book that changed something very significant.
Sure.
Experiencing that with other people, I think, is art in itself. And just the connection. I'm very, very passionate about that. I call it the witch web in my head, but just taking this person who has this highly specified weird interest and putting them with this person, making kind of modern salons and bits and pieces. And I think that smaller community structure is becoming kind of more important as technology progresses so much faster than culture. And I see so many people in Portland living their art. Fully and thoroughly. And I think that is partially a result of the pandemic. Is just, I think people are realizing that in the large scheme of things, you should really do what makes you happy, and let your freaky flag, whatever that might be, fly. And and being able to be the connector for that or holding the space for that, like the Clinton, to either do community events, bring people together, things that are cheap or free, and then the curation of certain films that for whatever reason I'm completely bonkers about, and I think that they're important to be shown or they're rare. That's my art.
Yeah, I'm very moved by what you had to say, and I heard in there too your description of like you can have the individual experience of what any art piece is, whatever that is, and there's also the collective piece. To be honest with you, when I heard that, I was like, oh yeah, of course, because I think in my head I've always kind of like individualized the experience, right? Maybe it's like I'm reading the book and it cracks my head in a particular way, which is me reading the book, but talking about the power of the collective when you're around that type of film that says, yeah, this film says, fuck you, I'm going to do like what I want to do. And I'm going to have this type of character and I'm going to queer this up and or whatever the project is that you're going to do that. And people go around it and are like, yeah, I want to tell you just one thing is like, I've thought about this idea because I'm newer to arts organizing as of like, doing the podcast or meeting people or me identifying as a artist. So this experience is new to me and it's new within the last few years, but I've also done like organizing within a pre-existing like environment that's K to 12 education that has all these components. And so I'm able to see the experience of what happens. Do you go in and try to connect and organize around things that are inspiring to people, movies that are like movements, drag shows, poetry readings, whatever it is. And now I'm looking at that and senses trying to look at like with the podcast and who I'm able to connect with. It's not a terrain that's preset like the other institutions. The art is open and the potential's open. And that's my transformation. So when you're talking about like the organizing component or that collective piece, as important of a point is, it still feels newer to me, like that everybody's experiencing the art, and making less art less separate in our experience, or at least in my head. Isn't that where the power is? Isn't that like the unlocking of like the people? Isn't that where it is?
I think it is. And I think that, sometimes when you just mention art, people think of a painting on a wall. But as corny as it sounds, for me, it's watching a life-changing movie, and it's with other people. Because if you think about it, you're experiencing the same thing. So your heartbeat syncs up. Your heart rate goes faster depending on the scene.
Yeah.
And that provides a different experience for me, especially the social aspect as well, being able to go out of the film and discuss it with people who have just seen it, and then talk about your individual experience collectively.
Yeah, I remember that the point that you made around like how there's this syncing, the physical syncing, and I forget which episode, but I was actually talking about opera. I've had a few opera singers to like learn about opera and that performance, and just some of the of voice and the physiological connections that people experience. And once you keyed into like what has happened to you and celebrate it, then you're like, wow, I can talk about that. I was transformed and felt great sorrow and joy within 10 minutes in an unexpected way, and not feel like a weirdo.
Yeah.
Like,
To me, it's a more authentic religious experience.
Here we are. We're talking about everything. We're talking about something. And tell me, I would qualify myself as a deep lover of horror film. The podcast itself has gotten into some Friday the 13th fan films. And I know there's a horror film festival, the Clinton Street Theater as well. I haven't had a lot of contact, or maybe linked up to like kind of like local regional horror film festivals. What's that about? It's at the end of the month. That sounds super exciting.
That's the Oregon Screams Film Festival. They're part of a bigger group that does like the Oregon Documentary Film Festival, the Oregon Comedy Film Festival, and they do all of those at the Clinton. In the past, we've had the Guiganol Fest, which is like a horror movie competition, 48-hour film fest kind of a thing. Basically, Aaron and I we're responsible for most of the programming, and we're both huge horror heads. So, anytime someone comes with any kind of horror fest, anything, we're usually pretty open to it.
I want to record for the record before I ask you the next question. I had the experience of watching a movie which just blew me away as a particular viewer. My experience of the whole thing was horror in the high desert. And I just wanted to mention that I don't want to say anything more about it, except that it was a very, very unique experience documentary. So thank you for allowing me to say that out loud, Susan. I allow you to say and mention any other things you need to say out loud. I wanted to follow up on the what is art question, and I know you got into this, but I do want to ask it just more generally is, what do you think the role of art is? And I say now as well, if it's changed, what's the role of art, and is it different in 2023 as we're talking than it's been before?
Yeah, I think it's different in that it's more accessible. As much as I'm kind of a technology curmudgeon, my movie specialty is like pre-95 and back. It's more accessible, and meaning that like people that don't have a lot of money and aren't just like a white man can get their art out more, just because of technology.
Yeah.
But that too sucks people in. It's that quote from David Lynch where he talks about how you're not watching a movie on your fucking phone.
Yeah.
That's it exactly. That's it exactly.
Thank you for that, by the way.
Huh?
Thank you for that, by the way.
Oh, so good. So good. That and Werner Herzog talking about how chickens are psychotic are just like in my head on a loop. Totally lost. I just started thinking about Werner Herzog. And
no, that's fine. I did the same thing. I got to tell you, before this interview, I said, I know we're going to have to, and not because it won't work, it's because it does work. There's going to be a couple points we're going to have to reset. I was talking in a recent episode because I was talking about volcanoes a lot, and I saw this obscure, maybe you know it, when Herzog went to the volcano that was going to erupt, there was this island, and all the reports were that it was going to erupt, and he went. This is in the 70s, I think. It was one of his early ones, and he went into it, and then he's just filming the wild dogs, and you're like, is that fucker gonna blow behind him?
It's one of those things where it's like, I love him. I appreciate his genius. Did he care about his film crew? No, not at all. But that's the thing too, is great artists aren't generally known as being the most stable.
Well, this is a director who openly gave testimony on video about firebombing his lead actor Klaus Kinski. So
Kinski was a handful.
He was a handful, but I don't know. I'm a union guy. You don't get you don't get to firebomb anybody. He can do other things.
Want to work for any of Herzog's films.
Oh.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Even being people that are, pro-worker, both of us were still like, yeah, Werner Herzog rules.
Yeah. What do you do? I mean, it's the output. You're looking at the output. You're watching. I've always had a strange, deep connection to his Strosek versus Herzog's movie Strosek, which, because I lived in Wisconsin for 12 years of my life, and being next to Plainfield, Wisconsin, which is the home of Ed Gein, the famous serial killer, this had this and of course he has locals. Herzog had locals in the production of the film. It has this super eerie 1970s Midwest creepy factor that is just huge in it. It's such a unique piece of filmmaking, particularly if you dabble around the Midwest and some of those folk. All due respect, love the Midwest, but that was quite the film, Strosek. Are you familiar with that one?
Yeah. I am not well traveled in the Midwest myself. Been mostly a West Coast kid, but no, that's part of the thing. Is like certain places have, for lack of a better word, like a psychic aura. Things that hang.
Super creepy. I got one more of those for Wisconsin before I ask you another philosophical question. I lived in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, on the west side of Marquette University campus, which is about 5 blocks from the killing grounds of Jeffrey Dahmer.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to photograph, and I have photographs because I'm just so... The haunted place, like the apartment building where all that horror happened, is knocked down. But looking at that type of place in the fall, old industrial city, weird Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and you can feel a structure that does not exist. That just there's nothing there, but there's something. I'm not trying to do a plug for the show. I'm just saying it was like weird Midwestern stuff.
It's yeah, I do think whether it's a placebo or not, certain places hold certain feelings, and the Clintons like that.
Yeah.
like especially when it's dark and no one's there. If you're the only
Tell
one in
us.
the theater, it's like you
Tell
can
us.
almost feel the butts.
Tell us.
Oh, you want to hear the ghost secrets?
Yeah.
Well, I haven't had as many as I would like. There's been a couple of sightings by a couple of other people, but for me, it's just knowing that for over 115 years, like butts have been in those seats, having that artistic experience, even if it was just a bunch of dudes whacking off, they were having it together.
That's still energy.
It's still energy. That's some Crowley and sex magic stuff, you know? Without them even knowing it.
Yeah. Well, just the experiences of the theater. I mean,
Yeah,
I thought of that. I thought of that right when you were talking about right there about like whatever it is, like whether it's sexual or otherwise, like the intense experiences in an area, and plus the I don't know, you probably agree, kind of like that spectral aspect of like film, and there are people there, but they're not real people, but they're near us as well, and they're doing things that it seems like haunted territory, a haunted world, particularly over 100 years.
exactly. And even, you know, thinking of people on the screen as ghosts, they're still humans that affect you emotionally. They change you by witnessing them, even if they're not there. And I think that just adds to the beautiful aura that the theater has. There's certain things too where you can go in a back corner. You can see where in the late 20s the screen was curved for sound, just like every other century theater. And up in the back corner there's a tiny bit of Art Deco stenciling remaining.
Oh my goodness.
And things like cleaning out the stage. Finally, we've been doing a lot of just refurbishing of the theater, you know, like helping structure bones a little better.
Yeah.
Finding a whole bunch of hand-painted film advertisements that Muriel from Church of Film did research on, these huge painted banners for like Kurosawa movies. They had traveled from a hand painter in Washington and Seattle. They went to a theater up there that Dennis Nybeck, the programmer, used to operate, traveled down to the Clinton when he owned it in the late 90s, and were shoved in the walls.
Whoa.
Yeah. So it's just an endless adventure, you know, and the theater has affected so many different people, and Dennis Nybeck, being an owner in the late 90s, he's a legendary archivist and programmer, especially for 16 millimeter things. He passed away recently. We had a memorial for him there. But I know that he's had a huge effect on a lot of my film programming and archiving friends now.
Yeah.
And just being able to trace that path through time, through people that are now in Austin, probably Wisconsin, New York, Seattle, different independent theaters. It's a really cool web.
I see that too, and I thank you for mentioning that. And it's like kind of like timely chatting about and thinking about connections in that web, because I think when you're sensitive to art and what it can do for people, you like, I mean, I know I can palpably feel excited when I know two people have connected in a place that I know how and why they should have connected, even if though it's like might seem just a passe event in the midst of everything that happens. I know that there's a magic point there, or like that there's like, oh, something might happen like out of that, not in the sense of manipulation, but in the sense of organization in placing people towards like a creative spirit. And you like to tap into that, like that type of energy. So how big is the Clinton Street theater?
It is a perfect 222 seats, single screen. It occupies a building on that corner. The whole block is like a movie set, really. It feels like walking onto a Paramount lot. Things have been different things throughout the years, but the Clintons always kind of been there and witnessed it, seen all the changes, and we've had people come in for memorials, octogenarians who were like, oh, last time I was here was in 1952, and that is amazing to hear. That's something we want to start as the Clinton Street Archives.
Yeah.
I would love to get stories from people, photographs throughout the years, and maybe collect them and put out like a monthly zine, just so people can, kind of see the history for themselves.
I love. I've been talking a bit about zines on the show, and a little bit more kind of like zine makers and comic book folks. And the podcast has a zine. Actually, it has one issue. There's a second one coming out, but really dropping into another vibrant art area that people who know about it get jazzed about. It's like super exciting to have cool, mostly cheap stuff and to be able to trade amongst each other, no matter what your age, no matter what your inclination. It's a lot of fun. So I want to see zines, because I almost, if I can, try to get any zine that I can get my hands on. That would be lovely. The second issue of the podcast zine is going to be all indigenous issue. So issue number 2. So
oh, that's rad. I'll look out for it.
Yeah, I'll get you. I'll definitely place a copy in your hands. Yeah.
And that's the beauty too, is having that gathering place, like for the Freak Freely Fest back in August. That is Mara and Corby, who do zines called Little Obsessions and Totally Different Head, which are all about weird art, music, that kind of a thing. Bringing them in brought in other music people. I know Aaron Coulter, he used to be involved in music stuff and comic stuff. It's like a beautiful cauldron to be able to put everybody's weird little interests in.
Yeah, I was just at I gotta tell you about this. I got another art question for you in just a moment, but I'm in Albany. I'm down in Albany, just not too far from up in Portland. So and there's a Comic Con here, a small Comic Con. It's called Hub City Comic Con. And I'm wearing a shirt, and it's called Sick Town. It's the roller derby team that I did not know about from Corvallis in Albany, and they're forming and putting together their league team. So I was so excited. I got my Sick Town jersey, and now know there is roller derby very close to where I am right now, and that has made my world a lot better than it was before that meeting.
Hey, it's a little thing.
I'm so excited. Susan, I wanted to ask you, one of the questions I sometimes ask it at the beginning has to do with seeing yourself as an artist and living that way. When did you see yourself as an artist?
It's hard for me to call myself, an artist in the respect, that I produce a physical object. For me, it's being able to live my passion, which has always been movies. Since as long as I can remember, I was a very latchkey kid with no restrictions. And I lived near a video store.
Rut-row.
I know. That combined with like an Oingo Boingo mixtape and Nick at Night basically formed my brain at the age of like 9. And it's been that way ever since. Being able to have a place where I can foster my specific weirdness and then share it with others and connect those people, mm-hmm. That to me is the craziest thing. And when I got to become a co-owner, when the sale happened, I'm still looking for tiny pianos to fall out of the sky and hit me, because I'm pretty sure in my 9th grade yearbook, when it says like, oh, what's your future goal? I mentioned something about Howard Hughes living in an old theater and collecting piss. So it's been a focus for a minute.
Yeah, and somewhere in that range, right? Yeah.
Exactly. And one thing throughout my life that I've always consistently just cared about, been obsessed about, excited about, like it brings pure enthusiasm in a relatively harsh, gnarly world, has always been this. And I think that being able to do that as part of the Clinton is just being able to live my art consistently, being able to program things like, John Waters and film noir, and being able to show folk horror that hasn't been seen, and then being able to show weird shit once in a while that has a 2-person attendance that I think is really important. That I think that my probably deep enthusiasm.
I had the weirdest movie experience I had, which thrills me to this day. I'm glad it happened to me, as strange as it was. But I was at the Portland Art Museum, and I think it's the Witzel Auditorium, the film screen that they have there at the art museum, and it was a Czech film festival, and I've watched a lot of Czech film, and I'm kind of fascinated by the culture. And I'm watching a bunch of Czech film, different experience, right? One's a comedy, one's this, and there's this. It was a drama, and it featured this woman who's the star, and highly charismatic, attractive lead, like really the star of it. And I looked in front of me, in the seat in front of me, it was the actress from. I guess she was from Prague, who was up there, and my head like exploded. Like for me, it was gleeful and but I'm like where things come in, you can't compute. It's like if we saw a UFO outside, most of us wouldn't see it because it doesn't fit into it shouldn't have happened. So our brain erases it. But I was looking and I was like, wow, there was such I never been able to describe it, but it was just really cool because there's, in New York City, I'm in Hollywood. I imagine you run to stars all the time. I'm just in a basement theater in Portland. I'm like, that's her right in front of me in the flesh. That type of magic is, I don't know. I remember it to this day. Yeah.
Yeah. And that could only happen in Portland. There's so much passion for enough weird things that I think it's kind of self-sustaining and self-fulfilling, because if people have places to go to find each other, things happen.
Yeah.
And I was able to do just like a little private kind of thanger night screening the other night with one of my friends who, is such a passion for them. And being able to see something on the big screen too is a whole different experience. It's like the art boot on your chest where you just sink into it.
Yeah. I sink into all different things. I did sink into the recent Scream 6 movie because just schlep it up on the screen for me. Give me the 3D glasses. I'm down. Whatever. That's just me. I'm in the seat. I'm doing the thing. But that was a lot of fun. But I wanted to ask you, Susan, about digging a little bit more on the art piece and seeing yourself as an artist. I was talking to Ricardo Levins Morales on the show one time, and he schooled me, and it was kind of the language I was using about labor and trying to organize that way, and then art being as some sort of like dichotomy or something different or something. And he's like, just really pulling me back into the heart and the center of it, whether it's labor or protecting rights to access to abortion, or it's any of these type of things that people like. It's the art, it's the visuals. Like when I've been in conflict, or my teachers that I represent have been in conflict, they draw like motherfuckers all of a sudden. They have the best teachery like postcards like poster boards that like insult but are not too mean but get under your skin. And like the art in the heart, in the organizing, it's all in that activity. And I feel that like in what you're talking about and like connecting to the arts, I feel sometimes it's kind of tough to get your hand on the art of that organizing, or to talk about. And for me, that's the heart of it. So I see you as a deep creative in your description of just how you pulled the program and pulled the people together. That's how I would perceive what you're saying. and I got that lesson from him of just being, Ken, don't talk about art as like some freaking something separate from the whole thing. What do you think about all that? I rambled a bit.
No. I agree. And that's really the thing too. You do think about it separately initially, but the whole point of any work of art, I think, is you're trying to make or change the way either yourself or someone else feels, or both. And that for me, I've had experiences that were curated by people. I've been to parties, had conversations with people that were so much more just impressive upon me, like intellectually and emotionally, than any piece of physical visual arts really gotten me.
Yeah.
And I think that ultimately when you boil everything down, the person viewing the art or making the art or living the art is trying to change or shape or impress a feeling.
Yeah.
And so I fully agree with that statement. I think that objects of art inspire that feeling, but that's ultimately what the quest is, no matter what the medium is. Whether you're connecting people, you're a painter, you're a filmmaker, a musician. Yeah.
I love that. And on the show too, like I've had over 180 episodes and talking about it, like I talk about some of my experience in those conversations. And like early on, it's art and philosophy, but then I realized that like the categories they don't work. They're not useful to attach to, because I would encounter female first that I wanted to tell the story about, like them being an incredible runner or displaying an issue like right on their body to bring awareness to it, or like whatever it was. And I found that the idea of it being so much more expansive and thinking about it expansively, because the categories just kind of like kind of like just narrow it down. It can be very difficult to describe what you're doing, or when you're organizing around like, what is it that you do? Well, I can tell you about what I do, and there's a lot of it, and I'm really good at it, and it's going down and things are happening. But how do I explain that to you? Because I could see your faces already get a little bit glazed over.
Well, I could talk your face off about the things that I'm interested. It's mostly like sci-fi, horror, golden age Hollywood, exploitation, things like that forever and ever. But a lot of people have that knowledge and that access. But for me, each film that's curated is for a specific purpose, a reason, a feeling. Doing Pagan May as the spring hits, it's a matter of like bringing people back to earth, but also for me, because I love blood and guts, a reason to do a little bit of spring horror. Let's see.
What happens? Tell me, like, dig down on that. Like, so I'm on the outside, right? I haven't been there, Pagan May, and you talked about like that event, and I would assume there's these energies and this art experience. Like what happens? What's the vibe?
The vibe is great. One of the things that I'm really excited to be making a May tradition is showing the original Wicker Man with Christopher Lee, which that movie is one of those movies when seen with other people on the big screen, it is epic, more epic than Gone with the Wind could ever be. It's
okay. You sold me. Yes.
And Christopher Lee in a turtleneck and that crazy hair just yelling, you will join his cult immediately. I don't care who you are. And you see Britt Eklund's butt. So good. And that I like to add a little William Castle flair where I can. He's my like fake pretend dad and definite idol. The first movie we showed in January was which I think is the most joyful movie. UHF, Weird Al's UHF. He's
Yeah,
the
yeah,
Shakespeare of our times. I love it.
yeah.
And as part of that, I had people come up on stage and eat Twinkie Wiener sandwiches, which are disgusting. But a little kid came up, and then his dad came out later and said that his shy little kid, that was the first time he'd ever gone in front of anybody for anything, usually a hide behind the coattails
Yeah,
kid.
yeah.
And he slammed a Twinkie Wiener dog and said, "I love Weird Al!"
Yes.
And that was magic.
That's like jumping across and over a mountain.
Exactly. That's the spirit of Mr. Weird Al Yankovic pulling that little kid out to just rage and party. See, I almost broke a lamp behind
that.
And things like that, it being a collective experience. Like, yeah, you can watch UHF on an iPad, but that shit's not going to happen.
Yeah. I love that. I love that.
That's something that I love to bring into where I can. I love a little bit of a gimmick if the movie's still good.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to say, because I got to make sure I get to this question, and Susan tomorrow knows I've been desperately seeking Susan to answer the question. Why is there something rather than nothing? So I do have to ask you that, and I need your answer.
Oh. Well, there's something rather than nothing, because nothing is the inevitable. It's the inevitable option that we'll all get to in the end. And we only have, a small amount of life bucks, let's say 100 if you're lucky.
Life bucks.
And don't have any fun. And that 100 years of life bucks is for the something. We're all going to go to the nothing, but the something for me is it's the time to have fun.
Yeah, I really dig that. I would say my personal response to when the pandemic stuff started hitting, I'm like, we're all gonna die. I need to do something with my life. That's what I was like.
I moved to Portland 5 months into it, and bing, bing, bong, if I don't get hit with a piano.
Yeah.
Sitting pretty, in my art.
Everything
is the best I can ask for.
Hey, it's all going to open up as we're doing this interview. I know the sun is shining through. We might listen to this podcast anytime, but I want to express the general spirit that the sun out in March in Oregon and in the 60s Fahrenheit is a very inspirational idea. And I was looking, Susan, at the programming calendar, more closely, when you look at calendars more closely, and just seeing all the incredible art and opportunities the Clinton Street Theater. And I do want to say, outside of just getting the description of the place, is that just really want to thank everybody involved with this, because the things we're talking about are very important, and they can be important to a certain number of people, a lot or a few. But what I think people don't realize, or I'm sensitive to, is that people need things. They need like certain type of experiences. And when they're hosted and shown without there having to be 175% profit for this 95 minutes, is like where some of it can happen. So I know that's the major place, where the theater lives in. Yeah.
And because just by its nature, the Clintons never gonna make anybody rich, nor should it. And that means that everyone involved is there for the pure enthusiasm of it.
And there's a lot that can go a lot of places. I'm learning and talking to folks and talking to artists. So the sun is out. Clinton Street Theater is dope as hell, strong, so many events. And I've been talking to Susan tomorrow. I got to tell you, it's a real blast to be able to meet you and be able to connect on what you're doing. and being able to talk about it on the show. Got a lot of new listeners, and I'm not shying away from any aspect of spreading what we just talked about, and like art, and like let's go, let's do it, let's spread the message. So it's so nice to it's just so nice to connect with you, Susan.
Well, you gotta come see a movie.
I'm gonna. And as a matter of fact, you said Harlan County, USA, I think, is as we're recording today. You should tell me, since we're still on it, what time is that showing today?
Harlan County, USA is showing today. Let me double check. I believe 3:30. It's a free screening, and I think that we have a full up RSVP list, but there's always wiggle room.
Wow. I have wow, that is so wild and free too. I love that film. I got the DVD copy either in the Union Hall or on the shelves I'm looking for over here. Yeah, I adore that one. That one changed me. There's a few that changed me within labor. I'm studying labor as a master's degree at the University of Massachusetts. Deep dive into labor film. That one's got it.
Harlan County is a good one. Aaron's really passionate about that too. And luckily, because we do some larger events and private rentals, we're able to do the occasional like free screening and also, show a movie once in a while. That it doesn't matter if people come, it just needs to get shown, which is important to everyone.
Yep. That doesn't have to be explained. That's awesome.
This is Something Rather Than Nothing,